truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. This will not be a normal episode of the podcast. This will be an Audible Essay, the 6th part in my 7-part series, A Story About Reality, that you can find on my Substack, imyourmoderator.substack.com. It was written in March of 2022, after the launch of Donald Trump's Truth Social platform and the appearance of the @Q account on Truth Social. A Story About Reality, Part 6, the #1 choice in news. Are any of the @Q posts newsworthy in and of themselves? They're not breaking stories, or are they? The events that shape our world are knowable in real time. With a well-constructed map of provable reality to depend on, you know what to look for and how to find it. A well-constructed map and understanding of the terrain allows for new information to be incorporated into the picture of the whole. Events in reality are not discrete or random. They exist inside a larger interpretation of reality. If they do not fit a prior understanding of reality, then the prior understanding of reality must be expanded. The map must account for the terrain, or else the map is useless. Small stories from across the world begin with local, independent reporting. People in well-connected information networks, from a few friends and neighbors to massive alternative social media followings, spread those local stories. Important and vetted information gets spread wider, and as it spreads, it is further vetted. It's not long before genuine experts in any given field are vetting the information for themselves. This vetting process is what gives stories their substance, because our experts are telling the truth, knowing their lives can be destroyed for doing so. These stories go viral, already vetted. The mainstream media is then forced to debunk the stories, and they fail at an increasing rate to do this. If the debunking fails before people forget about the true story, then a distraction to shift the mainstream narrative is necessary. Something dangerous or salacious works best. It should be clear that the truth community's decentralized process represents a better model for the flow of information. It is far more likely to produce an informed population than what we are given. And there is a link to an article with the headline, Double Masking, Why Some Infectious Disease Experts Say It's a Good Idea. Trust the science. Follow the science. When they are attacking me, they're attacking the science. And the article links to the famous Anthony Fauci quote. When legitimate experts explain the data and give their analysis directly to the public, allowing for questions, the need for an intermediary is eliminated. The media is bypassed. It becomes immediately obvious that the media's role is to disseminate the narratives of the interests it is paid to represent. The financial records back this up. The ubiquity of big pharma advertisements and overt sponsorship back it up. Even the guest lineup on cable news proves it. Why do all of the most powerful interests in the world agree that the world must hashtag stand with Ukraine, even if it means World War III? Why does Tucker Carlson have the only opposing viewpoint in the whole of mainstream media? It is incorrect at this point to imagine that the global mainstream media constitutes the news in any way. This is a mistake most people still make. The news is a story about what happens in reality, told honestly. Analysis of the news should include an absolute bias for hidden truths, especially when the powerful benefit from the hiding. Most people accept that the mainstream media's overt worship of the truth is a thin veil over various biases, occasionally ideological, but mostly due to various corporate and social requirements. Despite this, people emotionally connect to hosts or guests or brands of anger, and they convince themselves that the biases have disappeared. Very few in the mainstream media's audience would deny their favorite sources are biased. They know the sources are biased and don't care. They calculate the embarrassment of exposing themselves as someone who doesn't know that being more harmful to their ego and their image than admitting someone else's bias. Because they identify as someone who holds the right viewpoint, they will happily admit around certain people that they watch MSNBC. They do this to signal to their peers that they're not QAnon or a Fox News viewer. The bias is fully understood, but it makes no difference because what they watch makes them feel so right. The cultural enforcement of thought and behavior is the greatest weapon in an information war. The party controlling the flow of information has a powerful upper hand. The urge to control and limit the flow of information to the people only comes when the full flow of information will damage the party in control. Censoring beneficial speech, they think, is counterproductive. Controlling the flow of information can only be done through force, and effective force requires power. The goal of the restriction of speech is to misinform and control what the people think, to the benefit of the powerful. The powerful are losing their ability to control the flow of information because the technology has been turned against them. We have a better weapon on our side. We care. We are relentless. We tell the truth. We are learning the minute details of current events while the mainstream media spends every second debunking the truth with layers of provable falsehoods while saying, you can't trust those conspiracy theorists. We are better at moving and analyzing information. We have discernment. The overwhelming majority of the people in and around the truth community are Christians of deep faith, men and women of all races and financial classes, who believe it is their moral obligation to do what they can to resist and reject evil by doing good. And there is evil. It's everywhere. If your response to the presence of evil everywhere is to blame the people on the other side and censor them, it may be time to consider your role in participating in the evil that exists everywhere. But doesn't the truth community think the same about a different group of people? No, actually. Nearly everyone believes in a fully open information flow beyond some arguments about the particulars. Arguing about first principles is what we should be doing, not dissecting legal minutiae about Section 230 to claim that it's acceptable to censor. Likewise, nearly everyone believes the other side are the same as us, but brainwashed by a culture that set out to brainwash society and does so in the full view of everyone who isn't brainwashed. We are sad about this, but remain hopeful for all those who haven't truly wronged us. They don't believe us. They have not taken seriously their own moral obligation to truly listen to the people closest to them when we come in good faith and on their behalf. We are trying to help them understand how world events are negatively impacting our lives and theirs, and they decline the conversation. We are, after all, on the other side. We remain open to forgiving this, knowing how powerfully they are being manipulated, if only they can come to terms with it. We hope they do. We fear the consequences of people not waking up in time before reality becomes undeniable. We want people to snap out of it for the sake of a peaceful, stable society and for their own good. One day they will understand exactly what they have supported and continue to support. An important part of our shared future depends on how many people get out in time, for society and for those still asleep. The people on the other side are not the problem. They are being used. Without their awareness, they are submitting to the comfort that servitude provides, if they are willing to fully commit to servitude in one form or another. The people perpetrating this manipulation on our loved ones are the other side. But we do not try to censor them. We try to fully expose the truth about who they are and what they have done. We don't want to cancel or kill them. That's what they do. We want them to face justice and serve the sentence their legitimate, provable criminality demands. We want representation, legitimate courts, and legitimate elections. We want our human rights, the rights bestowed to us all as humans, the rights codified in our founding documents, our birthrights. And we want the people to be made whole. We demand all of it. None of this requires anyone being punished for their beliefs. If nothing else, we demand our most basic right, the right to believe, to speak, to assemble as we choose. It is our right as Americans. Quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Our current Congress not only enacts laws that directly violate the First Amendment, they collude with the most powerful companies on earth to eradicate it altogether. They destroy our rights, most of all with illegitimate elections. They prohibit examining the elections or even speaking of them. There is no greater distortion of reality than being told the people actually want things almost no one wants, and that obviously fraudulent elections prove it. It is through this falsification that people submit to servitude, thinking it must be the people's choice. Truth Social promises to be the last bastion of unrestricted political speech. The legacy platforms will continue to increase their censorship to the point where almost no one goes uncensored at some point. If there is nowhere to turn after being censored, then free speech, as we know it, ends. If you have spoken dangerous truths online, you are being censored in one way or another. You may not know it. You may be restricted or shadow banned. You are definitely manipulated by the content you're shown, which means you're subject to the censoring of others. The algorithm will choose your experience one way or another. It will get its way. If you have not yet been censored or manipulated, and you discuss politics online, it should be clear that you are not speaking the unapproved truth about politics. If you speak only approved truths about the most important issues in the history of mankind, you make yourself part of the problem. You are not actually speaking about politics at all. You are doing free advertising for corporate sponsors in direct opposition to the good of your family, friends, and neighbors. You are almost definitely advertising in direct opposition to your own interests. You are one of the outermost branches of a pyramid scheme that stopped creating profit many levels above you. The benefits will not be realized. blame the supply chain. If you do not discuss politics online, you are still subject to what censorship produces, a constantly and intentionally false picture of the world. Once this false picture is fully adopted, contradictory information is rejected immediately as a belief of the other side, even when the other side is right, especially when the other side is right. This is the only commandment. Thou shalt not believe anything the other side believes, no matter what. The only standard of proof for any claim is the knowledge that the other side says it's wrong. If the other side believes it, it must be wrong. The other side is always wrong because of who they are. This is bigotry, and it is promoted society-wide. This is how hate movements start, and we are in the midst of a hate movement. The most powerful people and institutions in the world are working openly and directly for total and complete societal control. A large portion of society is currently promoting the permanent subjugation of others through the propagation of the false narrative. They've selected who will be subjugated based on the set of beliefs they hold and express. These judges assume they will never be subjugated themselves because of who they are. They are powerful. They are chosen. Well, at least they're like the powerful and chosen in terms of their expressed political positions. Same difference. Kanye West is rich, famous, smart, and talented. He is one of the most popular artists in music history. He was recently, at the time, suspended from Instagram for a day based on what he was expressing. If it can happen to him, it can happen to you. If you have told the unapproved truth online, it has happened to you. If one day you find it in you to speak an unapproved truth online, it will happen to you. The only way out of this problem is through the unrestricted access to information our First Amendment provides. Many believe that Truth Social represents the possibility of this promise. While we don't know what shape the Truth Social experience will ultimately take, people believe the technology is built to be constantly accessible and fully protective of free political speech. Truth Social CEO Devin Nunes seems to agree, and a screenshot is attached with two pictures side by side of the same man in a bathrobe going waterboarding, but with the heads of Kash Patel and Dan Scavino replacing the head of the waterboarder. Devin Nunes writes, "Good truth morning. Woke up to watch Kash and Dan Scavino do some digital surfing on the now liberated, free and open internet. At least for those of us lucky enough to be here testing truth. If Q posts and @Q posts cause a massive, genuinely diverse community to research, analyze, vet, and communicate critical information, then the posts are of great value to humanity. If this process forces critical information into the collective consciousness, the potential for good is unbounded. If the mainstream media is forced to respond to an issue no one was supposed to talk about, like the Ukrainian biolabs, for instance, it's hard to argue that Q, @Q, and the truth community are not making and breaking news. What springs forth from the Q and @Q posts is not only newsworthy, in many ways it is the news. This much should be clear. The media has spent years creating the QAnon boogeyman. The boogeyman is amorphous and can be used to discredit anything. Q posts stopped in December 2020, but QAnon is still referenced daily in the news and on TV. @Q appeared on Truth Social and began creating @Q posts and interacting with the Truth Social team and major figures in the America First movement. Why won't the media cover it? Because the boogeyman loses its ability to frighten when people understand the boogeyman. For the sake of the boogeyman's effectiveness, people must never learn the reality. The media tells you QAnons are responsible for this sort of thing, and it is a picture, that famous picture of people standing on top of cars in Minneapolis during the celebration of George Floyd with everything on fire. The point being, of course, that it is not the QAnons who are burning down cities. And beneath that, another picture is attached of the scene from the movie Home Alone, where the child who was left home alone is sitting in the church pew next to the older man who he was once afraid of, but finds out is actually a very nice and protective person. So those nasty QAnons are portrayed as violent domestic terrorists, but the reality is closer to them being like that old man with the shovel in the movie Home Alone. Would those violent QAnons hit criminals over the head with a shovel to protect an innocent but mischievous kid? I imagine they would, and many would be proud that they did. That's not the worst kind of person to have around. They'd also share their stories and doubts with you in church. That sort of person is a good kind to have around as well. The QAnons are not boogeymen. They're American patriots and regular citizens trying to take care of themselves and their loved ones, while their unelected and uncaring government makes it harder intentionally by the day. They approach these troubles with faith and commitment. When they make mistakes, they accept them and adjust. They don't believe they know everything, but they're confident in what they do know. They're willing to defend what they know, and when they can't, they're willing to learn. Some members of the truth community are willing to believe in ideas that others aren't. Some have theories about what lurks in deep underground military bases, DUMBs. Some are obsessed with aliens. Many discuss ideas that strike people as utterly insane. To people who think masks can stop aerosolized viral contagions. Ideas like adrenochrome, a real thing that must not be true. I don't know if adrenochrome is harvested and consumed as some describe it, but I know the people who think so would be happy to support their beliefs, and we could have a respectful conversation about it. Is worrying about these things gullible, or is it open-minded? I guess that would depend on who turns out to be right about important things, like Trump-Russia collusion being a hoax. Worrying about DUMBs is not as crazy as believing that the definition of woman is unknowable for a non-biologist, as if serious biologists have a different scientific definition. The media's sole purpose is creating a false reality. The audience is trained to be wrong about absolutely everything. That's the goal. I will choose to listen to a loony QAnon every single time. Nearly every person in the truth community knows far more about every relevant issue than virtually any Biden voter. Yet we are told the opposite is true. Titles and credentials and diplomas are thin cover now. We can see the truth. Those who still support the illegitimate regime and its priorities have no clue why they believe anything. Everything they think they know is wrong, because everything they believe is a lie they've chosen to accept in service of making their lives ever easier. They are unwilling to detach from the false reality because they imagine everything will fall apart. Instead, they double down on the false reality again and again, even as they bear witness to everything falling apart for everyone who isn't them. In doubling down, those who still support the illegitimate regime and its priorities agree to defend ever more depraved acts and events that strike against the moral conscience of everyone whose eyes are open to verifiable reality. In the recent past, they've been forced to defend propaganda, inflation, forced vaccination, racist hiring practices, child abuse, a slave trade on the border, censorship, the ability to control people's spending, political imprisonment, and corrupt political dealings. Since the Ukraine invasion began, they've been convinced to defend their total indifference to war, actual Nazis, and lenient sentences for pedophilia. As the narrative shifts, they will soon be forced to rationalize election fraud and treason. Those who still support the illegitimate regime and its priorities will defend these evils because they identify with the kind of people who are promoting these evils, and people like them cannot actually be bad. There is nothing that cannot be rationalized on these terms. Who is more dangerous, the people who want to see these evils eliminated from our society, or the people who commit their existence to rationalizing and justifying those evils? In a sane world, this wouldn't be a question. QAnons didn't spy on a campaign or a White House. QAnons didn't mandate masks or lockdowns or the injection of an experimental gene therapy, none of which saved lives, all of which continue to leave disillusionment and devastation in their wake. QAnon didn't plot to kidnap Michigan's governor or instigate violence at the Capitol on January 6th. Federal law enforcement agencies were primarily responsible for both. QAnon didn't kill police, burn cities, loot stores, or make all of that legal. That was BLM Antifa and the people who fund and organize the group. These are the facts. They don't become fictions just because the media created a boogeyman to blame for all the problems in the world. The boogeyman exists so the very people who have, to this day, never considered they might be wrong don't have to worry that their side is the problem. The boogeyman exists because if all of us who have woken up or were never asleep aren't inherently bad, the other side may have to think about what it means for them that they hate us. The boogeyman is now their North Star, and they are led farther down the path. They are in an information war that they pretend isn't happening. Everything they know is a lie. They are lost to the point where they don't believe there's a way back. The boogeyman is everything. The media will not cover the reemergence of Q on Truth Social because to do so would expose the reality. There is no boogeyman. This has been A Story About Reality, Part 6, the number one choice in news. I will be back soon with Part 7.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening to this episode for free, you can support me and support the show and the work I do by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can do so for as low as $50 a year or $5 a month. Comes out to under $0.25 per episode, and you'll blast right through the paywall for all of the writing. The merch store is www.cancelcouture.com, and you can find everything else by heading to Linktree, linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon out on the range.
It's happening!